She walks into the military memorial hall with quiet dignity, her pregnant belly leading the way. They see only her skin color, not her medals, not her sacrifice. They humiliate her, violate her, but they don't know who she really is. Colonel Martha Washington adjusted her simple cotton blouse over her 7-month pregnant belly as she climbed the steps of the Arlington Military Memorial Center. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble entrance, where flags fluttered in the gentle breeze. At 38, her face carried the weathered lines of 3 tours in Afghanistan, yet maintained a serene dignity that neither time nor hardship had diminished. She clutched a worn leather portfolio containing her speech for today's Silver Star ceremony honoring fallen soldiers from her former unit. Her silver-streaked hair was neatly braided in tight coils against her scalp, a style she'd worn throughout her 20 years of service. Martha didn't wear her uniform today. She never did at public events since retiring last year. She preferred entering as a citizen, quiet, composed, observant, but she wasn't greeted as the decorated veteran she was. The security checkpoint's energy shifted the moment she approached. Chief Security Officer Raymond Bradley, a stocky man with a permanent scowl, narrowed his eyes as she approached the metal detectors. His gaze lingered first on her dark skin, then dismissively over her pregnant belly, and finally settled on her simple, modest clothing. "Ma'am," he said, voice unnecessarily loud. "Step to the side, please." Martha paused, balancing herself carefully. "Is there a problem?" Bradley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned to a younger guard. "Special screening required." "May I ask why?" Martha's voice remained calm, a habit formed through years of command. "You match a profile," Bradley replied, looking past her rather than at her. "No proper ID displayed. Can't just walk into a military ceremony looking like that." Martha reached into her purse and produced her military identification. The card clearly showed her rank and decorations, including her Silver Star. Bradley barely glanced at it before slipping it into his pocket. "I'll need that returned," Martha said firmly. Bradley stepped closer, invading her space. "You in some kind of hurry, sweetheart?" The word struck like a physical blow. A younger female guard shifted uncomfortably by the scanner, but remained silent. "I need to prepare for the ceremony," Martha explained. "I'm speaking today." "Then you'll follow procedure," Bradley snapped. "That includes enhanced security checks for suspicious individuals." Without waiting for her response, he gripped her upper arm firmly, not enough to bruise, but with unmistakable authority, and steered her toward a side hallway, away from the main security area into a windowless screening room. The air inside was stuffy and cold. A metal chair stood in the center, a rolling car of scanning equipment beside it, and a pair of electric clippers resting ominously on the edge. Martha's heart quickened as maternal instinct warned of danger. She placed a protective hand over her belly. "I don't consent to this," she said clearly. "You have no legal cause to detain me." "Looking suspicious is cause enough," Bradley replied, motioning to the chair. "Sit down." Martha didn't move. Years of military training had taught her to assess threats before reacting. This man was a bully, not a professional. But she was also 7 months pregnant, alone in a windowless room. Her priority had to be her child's safety. "I'm going to need to speak with your supervisor," she said, her voice level. Bradley laughed, a short, harsh sound. "I am the supervisor. 20 years in private security after 10 in the Army. I know what I'm doing." "Then you should recognize military ID when you see it." In response, Bradley held up her ID card between 2 fingers. "This? Anyone can get these made. Besides, no way you're a colonel. Not with that hair." Martha felt heat rise to her face, but kept her expression neutral. "Sir, I'm pregnant and uncomfortable. I'm here to speak at the Silver Star ceremony from my former unit. Please return my identification and allow me to proceed." Instead of responding, Bradley gestured, and 2 more guards entered the room. One grabbed Martha's purse, while another moved behind her. She remained standing, military bearing intact despite her pregnancy. "Standard protocol," Bradley said, picking up the clippers. "You could be hiding anything in that hair." Martha's hand instinctively went to her braids, the same style she'd worn through dust storms in Kandahar and field hospitals near Kabul. This is completely unnecessary and inappropriate. Not your call to make, Bradley replied, powering on the clippers. The harsh buzz filled the small room. Either we check your hair or you don't enter. Simple. This is a violation of my rights, Martha stated firmly. I want your full name and badge number. No one answered. Instead, the guards moved closer, hemming her in. Martha calculated her options. Physical resistance could endanger her baby. Creating a scene might jeopardize the ceremony. Military training had taught her sometimes retreat was a wiser strategy. Live to fight the battle on better ground. But there was no retreat here. Bradley stepped forward, clippers humming. Sit down. Martha sat, her back straight as a rifle. You will regret this, she said quietly. Heard that before, Bradley sneered. The clippers touched her scalp, cold and vibrating. Martha didn't flinch as the first braid fell to the floor. Then another, and another. 20 years of identity and pride dropping in coils around her feet. She didn't cry out, didn't beg, didn't break. The guards exchanged uncomfortable glances as Bradley continued, his movements becoming more aggressive as her calm composure clearly angered him. She looks better already, he muttered. Should have come in with some respect. Martha's hands rested protectively on her belly, feeling her baby kick as if in protest. When Bradley finally finished, her scalp felt cold, exposed, patches of uneven hair where her beautiful braids had been. You're free to go, Bradley said, wiping loose hair from his hands. Ceremony's that way. He tossed her ID card onto her lap. Martha rose slowly, one hand on her belly, the other steadying herself against sudden dizziness. The room was silent except for her measured breathing. She retrieved her ID without a word and walked toward the door with the same dignity she carried across battlefields. In the empty hallway, she paused, leaning against the wall. Her scalp burned with humiliation. In Afghanistan, she treated wounded soldiers under enemy fire without flinching. She commanded units through impossible terrain. She'd earned every decoration on her record through blood and sacrifice. And yet here, in her own country, in a memorial built to honor service members like her, she'd been stripped of dignity because of her skin. Her baby kicked again, a reminder of the future she was fighting for. Martha straightened her shoulders. This wasn't the first time she'd faced discrimination, but something felt different today. Perhaps it was a pregnancy, creating new life while being treated as less than human. Perhaps it was standing in a building dedicated to those who died for freedom, only to be denied that very freedom. Down the corridor, she could hear the growing murmur of the gathering crowd. Distinguished generals, politicians, Gold Star families, all assembling to honor fallen heroes, unaware of what just transpired. Martha found a restroom and examined her reflection. Her scalp was a patchwork of uneven tufts where her beautiful braids had been. Her face looked older, wearier, the lines around her eyes deeper. But her eyes themselves remained clear, focused. She splashed cold water on her face and dried it carefully. A cleaning woman entered, gasped softly at Martha's appearance, then quickly averted her eyes. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she asked quietly. Martha met her gaze in the mirror. "Not yet, but I will be." She opened her portfolio, checking that her speech was still intact. The pages were creased but readable. She scanned the words she'd written about sacrifice, about honor, about the true meaning of service. Her hand drifted to her bare scalp, then to her pregnant belly. The contrast struck her. Creation and destruction, hope and humiliation, all contained in one body. Martha squared her shoulders. The ceremony would begin in 15 minutes. She was still a soldier, still an officer. She would complete her mission, whatever the cost. She had not survived 3 tours to be defeated by ignorance and hatred on her own soil. The backstage area of the memorial hall buzzed with activity. Staff members hurried about, checking microphones, arranging chairs, reviewing the program. Martha moved through them like a ghost, her presence barely registering. She found the preparation room where speakers were gathering. A young event coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. then stopped abruptly, eyes widening at Martha's appearance. "Can I help you?" he asked hesitantly. "I'm Colonel Washington," Martha replied calmly. "I'm speaking today." The coordinator's face shifted from confusion to embarrassment. "Oh, I'm so sorry, we weren't." He fumbled with his clipboard. "You're actually our keynote speaker. The general has been asking for you." Martha nodded. "I was delayed at security." Behind him, a door opened, and Brigadier General James Holloway emerged, silver-haired and imposing. His eyes found Martha immediately, his greeting dying on his lips as he took in her shorn head and tired eyes. "Martha," he said, using her first name as old friends did. "What happened?" She met his gaze directly. "Security happened, James. Specifically, your head of security." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by anger. "Bradley?" She nodded once. General Holloway's jaw tightened. He'd served with Martha for 15 years, had recommended her for her Silver Star after she'd saved 17 soldiers while under heavy fire outside Kandahar. "I'll handle this immediately," he began, reaching for his radio. "No." Martha stopped him with a light touch on his arm. "Not yet." She glanced toward the stage, where the program would soon begin. The seats were filling with military personnel, families of the fallen, politicians, and press. "I have a better idea," she said, her voice steady. "Is the seating arrangement as we discussed?" General Holloway nodded slowly. "Yes, you'll be front and center, right next to the Secretary of Defense." "And security personnel?" "Bradley always stands at stage left during these events. Makes a show of guarding the dignitaries." The general's eyes narrowed as he began to understand. "What are you thinking, Colonel?" Martha's hand rested on her belly. "I'm thinking it's time for a lesson in recognition and respect." The memorial hall fell silent as the ceremony began. Rows of medals gleamed on uniformed chests. Flags stood at attention behind the podium. Families of fallen soldiers sat in the front rows, their faces solemn with remembrance. On stage, distinguished military leaders and government officials took their places. At stage left, Bradley stood at attention, now in formal security attire, surveying the crowd with practiced vigilance. General Holloway approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this solemn occasion to honor the brave men and women of Operation Enduring Freedom. Today, we have a very special guest to deliver our keynote address." Bradley scanned the audience, bored. These ceremonies were all the same to him. A decorated commander whose leadership saved countless lives during the Battle of Kandahar Valley. A recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. A soldier whose courage under fire exemplifies the highest traditions of military service. Martha stood in the wings, one hand instinctively touching her scalp, the other resting on her belly. She took a deep breath. "Please welcome Colonel Martha Washington." The audience rose in respectful applause as Martha walked onto the stage with military precision. Her scalp, unevenly shorn and exposed under bright lights, drew confused murmurs. But her bearing remained impeccable, her pregnant silhouette dignified and strong. Bradley's mouth fell open. The blood drained from his face as recognition dawned. He took an involuntary step backward, bumping into a flag stand. Martha took her place at the podium, acknowledging the Secretary of Defense with a nod. She arranged her speech notes carefully, then looked out over the audience. "Thank you, General Holloway," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Before I speak about our fallen comrades, I want to talk about recognition." Her eyes found Bradley, who stood frozen in place, panic evident on his face. Recognition isn't about uniforms or insignia. It's about seeing the person before you, their dignity, their humanity, their worth. The audience was silent, captivated by her presence and confused by her appearance. Earlier today, in this very building, I was not recognized. I was detained, humiliated, and had my hair forcibly removed because I didn't look like someone who belonged here. Gasps echoed through the hall. Eyes turned toward Bradley, who was now visibly trembling. I share this not for sympathy, but because what happened to me happens to countless Americans every day. People who have served this country, sacrificed for this country, even died for this country. yet are still seen as outsiders because of their skin color. Martha's hand gently touched her belly. I fight not just for those we've lost, but for the future we're creating. The audience sat stunned. General Holloway had already moved to the side of the stage, speaking urgently into his radio. Two military police officers approached Bradley, who stood rooted in place, his face ashen. Martha continued her speech, her voice unwavering as she honored fallen comrades. Not once did she directly address Bradley again. She didn't need to. His public humiliation was unfolding without her intervention. As she concluded a thunderous applause, Bradley was being escorted from hall, his security credentials confiscated. The Secretary of Defense himself approached Martha, extending his hand in respect. "Colonel Washington," he said, voice carrying in the now silent hall. "On behalf of the Department of Defense, I offer our deepest apologies for the inexcusable treatment you received today. I assure you, there will be a full investigation and appropriate consequences." Martha shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary. But more important than consequences for one man is change for our institution. This isn't an isolated incident." The Secretary nodded gravely. "You have my word. Your experience will not be forgotten or dismissed." As Martha left the stage, military personnel from every branch stood at attention, offering the highest sign of respect they could give: recognition of her rank, her sacrifice, and her unwavering dignity. Martha's stand that day sparked national conversation about racial bias and respect for veterans. Bradley was fired and charged with assault. The Memorial Center implemented new training programs, named after Colonel Washington's unborn daughter. Remember, respect isn't earned, it's recognized. Comment below with respect if you believe everyone deserves dignity, regardless of appearance.